All right, we're going to get started with the second session tonight. As we do here at Keystone Sessions, if you would like to continue your amazing conversations and connections that you make with each other, please do so over on the networking side so we can have some peace and quiet for my next conversation. I also have a slight headache, so I would appreciate the peace and quiet so it doesn't make my headache any worse. How's that? So we are going to do, I know, drink lots of water. I got it. Drink your water. This is part of our Founder Stories series, and this is brought to you by an organization that I've had a long affiliation with, Pipeline Entrepreneurs. And we are graced with the presence of a Pipeline member tonight. I don't know if she caught it during the first presentation, but I don't typically introduce our guests because I always am nervous I'm going to mess that up somehow. This is an easy one, I can do it, but I'm going to stay true to tradition. So if you don't mind, introduce yourself. Tell us a little about who you are.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me here. My name is Nomi Smith, and I'm the founder of PMI Rate Pro, an insurtech provider here in the Kansas City.
So Nomi, let's start with you. Let's start with your story a little bit, your background, just to help people understand kind of how entrepreneurs land in the spots that they land in, right? There's a lot of different paths, a lot of different journeys to get to this point. So where are you from? I guess let's start there.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you a really crazy story of how I became an entrepreneur when I was really young. So I'm from Mongolia. I was born and raised there, and Mongolia was actually a communist country when I was a child. So when you live in a communist country, what happens is on a weekly basis you get ratio of food, right? You get like a pound of flour, a jug of milk, and that's it. That's what your family has. But everybody has a job, everybody has income. So around the age of about 8 or 9, the Russian piece of the communists left my country. And so overnight what happens is when you're left with, being able to get everything provided, and all of a sudden, holy cow, everything's gone. What do you do? So the entire country kind of went into real poverty, right? Overnight. And I remember very specifically my parents just being super poor. And the one thing, this is where the story gets crazy, the one thing that couldn't live with that was smoking. They had to smoke, and they just didn't really have the money to buy smoke. And also my neighbor, so we lived on a 5-story, in a 5-story apartment, and the neighbor upstairs was making alcohol in our apartment and selling them, right? And because there's no alcohol, right? Now all of a sudden it's in demand because if you think about poor countries and what they need to do is they need to smoke and drink. Yeah. But anyway, what happened here was that as a child, I had this intense desire of what can I do for my parents? And the thing that I thought of was like, okay, I gotta go make money so I can buy them a smoke. This is literally how...
How old are you?
I was like 8 or 9. So what would happen is I would go just like roam around the streets and collect bottles. And I would take it upstairs and sell it to is it called bootlegger?
Yeah,
where they're making,
bootlegger, right?
Yeah, so I would actually take it upstairs and sell the bottles to her. And then whatever money I made, I went and got cigarettes. And over there, it doesn't really matter how old you are. You can purchase cigarettes. So I would hide the cigarettes when my parents would be like, real need of like, okay, I don't have a cigarette. I would bring it out and they would just get so excited. And that was my motivation of like becoming an entrepreneur. I think that's where I was all
Now, did you sell them to your parents?
No.
No, okay.
They got so used to it towards the end, I wouldn't actually have any saved up. I'm like, you have some, like bring it out.
Sell some bottles.
Yeah, so that's, I think, where I realized that you can actually go do something and earn money and be able to, you're a child, you're just trying to please your parents, right? So that's how I was born.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, I mean, this whole nature versus nurture conversation, it sounds like there was a little innate entrepreneur in you very early on. So,
yeah.
What was this were there other people that you were around that were doing similar things? Like, was that kind of entrepreneurial spirit something that emerged from that transition in the country, or were you unique in that way?
No, I wouldn't say I was unique. I think many of the people were just much more of a risk taker. When you get put into a position of a corner where you have to go fend for yourself, or you're not going to have food, right? You are kind of put to go figure out creative ways to make a living. So now if you think about America, and if you think about, or just, sorry, I don't mean to generalize here, but if you go to any other country, I think you'll find more people that are more risk-taking and ready to kind of go into entrepreneurship and looking for opportunities, right, to better their life, because you don't have any other choice. So I don't think I'm unique in that way. I just think that that there are more opportunities to follow that desire here in a country like this, because there just is a lot of need for innovation and entrepreneurship.
So how did you get here? So from Mongolia, so when did you leave Mongolia?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, my parents took us to Canada, and this is where I kind of watched my parents do crazy things. So they didn't speak English. They took us there so that I could have the opportunity to learn how to speak English and have a better opportunity, right? So they worked 2 jobs. I remember my dad working really, really hard. Like, he would go early in the morning, go wash cars, come home with like wet socks, and he would take a shower, and then he'd go to his second job, which was at a restaurant. So I watched him do that. And then when I was like 18, we actually got sent back to Mongolia because immigration stuff didn't work out. And my parents saved up all of their money and started an Italian restaurant in Mongolia. So I watched them actually operate a restaurant, because my mom was working as a chef helper in Canada, right? So she learned all that, took it home, and actually built a restaurant. So that's where I went to undergrad. And then I just really quickly realized, okay, in Canada, my parents were able to make a living when they don't speak English. They didn't have to do anything illegal. They were able to work and make an honest living, right? And I wanted to ultimately live in a place where I could also do that. And I think if you look at third world countries, a lot of times you have to kind of sell some of your soul, or to, just do not the most honest things to get ahead. And I didn't want to be in that position now that I've had a taste of what honest, living looks like. So then my only chance, I couldn't go back to Canada because of immigration issues. So my only chance was to come to the United States. So I was looking for a university that would accept me without any application fees, because that was 15 years ago. Our banking industry was so behind the times, and I didn't really have an application, like a Visa card or a money order, to be able to send an application fee. So I was literally going from A to Z in the universities, like, okay, who doesn't have application fees? And I didn't go very far. I landed at Avila University, which is
still in the A's.
It's still in the A's. I never passed the A's. Avila University is a small Catholic school in Kansas City. So that's what brought me here to America.
First school you found in the alphabet.
First school.
Didn't have an application fee.
That's right. I was in Missouri, and I remember, I had a family friend that drove me in, and I looked at it's a small school, so you've seen in the movies of like huge campuses, and here I'm going into Avila University. It's a small school, but that was my first experience coming to Kansas.
That's amazing. Truly amazing. I think of all the ways people have selected their schools, I've talked to other immigrants that have landed in Kansas City in very similar, from my perspective, odd circumstances on how they landed here. But that might be the most odd one. All right, so you're in Kansas City. Now, from the first entrepreneurial experience that you had in Mongolia, as an 8-year-old selling bottles to buy cigarettes, which is also an amazing story, until Avila, any other kind of like moments where, other than the observation of your parents, the hard work and the honest work that your parents did, any other inclination that you were going to be a business owner or that you were going to start your own business, or like what did you go to school for? What did you study in school?
Yeah, so I studied banking in my undergrad and then finance in my MBA. I always had really hefty goals. Like after I graduated, I went to work for a U.S. bank as a teller, and I knew ultimately I wanted to become a CEO. And so here I am, starting as a teller, trying to be a CEO of a huge bank like U.S. bank, right? So I always knew that I wanted to, I think, just change how things are done. But I never knew that I was gonna ultimately like have my own startup. That just seems so far away from what you can, like if it's not there, it's hard to imagine that you could be there. But I always knew that I wanted to be in leadership position to be able to change things for the better. And that's perhaps why I ended up going the route that I have.
Was this something that you identified in? Is this something that you're saying I mean this, in a sincere way? Is this something you're saying in hindsight, or were you that intentional when you were in college or in your first job at U.S. Bank, where that was your aspiration and you knew that's what you wanted to do?
That's such a good question, because it actually goes to my core need, right? What was at the core need at the time that wanted me to become a CEO? It was really just so that I was chasing success, right? So what does success look like is to me is like, okay, can I advance from here to here? And what's the highest level of success in my eyes was becoming a CEO. So that was just trying to get there to meet that core need, right?
Had you shared this aspiration with others at this point?
Yeah, for sure.
What kind of feedback did you get from people when you told them that you wanted to be the CEO of U.S. Bank, or that you wanted to be the CEO of a big company like that?
It's not, that's a really interesting question. I would really quickly outgrow many relationships, co-working relationship, manager relationships, because ultimately maybe it's not their fault, it's just that they don't see the path forward, so they'd rather, I think, you stay in the same path that they are. So in the working space, not much support there. One or two people, right, in the leadership position will help to kind of pull you up, but that's rare occasions, right? But in terms of my spouse, he'd always say like, oh, I always knew you wanted to be CEO. What do you mean, you're a CEO now? Like, why are you even complaining about anything? You wanted this the whole time.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and I think my parents would always be really encouraging, but other than that, I think it's hard to find the network of people that understand where you're trying to go and then help you pull it.
Yeah.
That's rare.
It's extremely rare, and it's good that you have people in your life that have supported that, even if they weren't those coworkers or those I'll call them casual acquaintances that pass through our lives. I'm a big believer and big fan in you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and you should always, and I don't say this in a kind of transactional way, but there are people that you run into in life that want you to stay where they're at. And you have to evaluate that and know that and be comfortable with, I'm moving on, or I'm moving up, or I'm doing what I want to do, and that might mean our relationship is a point in time. Mm-hmm. Still value the relationship that you have, with them, but it just changes.
It
right?
does.
Yeah. And was it that support, or was it just that you were moving to different positions or moving into different jobs? How long were you at U.S. Bank, I guess?
So I was at U.S. Bank for 4 years, and still, right, the goal from the first day was to become the CEO. I grew through positions to where I actually became the highest of what I could be. And then I met my next boss to be, who was a mortgage lender at a different company. He asked me to come join him, and he just caught me at a really good time where I was getting tired of corporate bureaucracy. And so that was my moment in time of like, okay, I gotta take the risk and I gotta get out of this and try something else.
You just said something that I think is important for people to, just in career pathing, you just said the person who would become your boss.
Yeah.
So you had a point in time where you knew the person before it wasn't a cold application process, it was you got the job because you knew someone kind of situation?
So he was a customer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so he was a customer who had a difficult situation that I was able to kind of help communicate through and make it smooth. And then he was like, hey, we have a team. Would you like to come join me, work with me? So,
okay, so then you went into the mortgage side of banking?
yes, and I became a mortgage banker.
All right, this is a pivotal point in the story.
It is,
yeah.
very much so.
Yeah, so explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so, you know, I went over to the mortgage side, learned a lot, and this is where I kind of learned that there's some inefficiencies in the process of how mortgages are obtained. And over time, just realized that there was a pain point that I wanted to solve. And so this is why it's pivotal, because now my company is based on this pain point that I felt as the mortgage professional on a daily basis. And so I went on to solve that, but obviously I didn't do it alone, right? I met the right people to help me kind of get to the next level.
So talk about that problem.
Yeah, so when home buyers don't have 20% to put down, home buyers have to pay what's called a private mortgage insurance. And even though the home buyers pay for this insurance, only mortgage lenders can shop for this insurance. So what I would do is have to go to 6 separate places to, you know, input the home buyer's information to get the quotes. And it was too time consuming. And I was motivated to, you know, shop all 6 of them, even though it was time consuming, because I wanted to be able to bring transparent pricing to all of my home buyers. And so we created what's called a kayak to compare side by side. So lenders will go to our website, put in the information once, and it can get side by side instead of going 6 separate times.
That's it. Now, prior to this, when you say transparency to the home buyer, as a former home buyer, I had no idea that the PMI was shoppable. It was just presented to me as a home buyer.
Correct.
Is that is that the way it's always just worked?
Yeah.
And the transparency that you're talking about for the home buyer, are you solving that problem, or are you solving the problem for the institution that's trying to go get that insurance?
You know, both, right? So thinking of like what really inspired me to start the company or start the technology piece was so that I could help my home buyer. Because I just thought it was so unfair that you as a home buyer could be overpaying because the lender wasn't taking the time to, because it's inefficient, right? But over time, what it became, the product itself became an efficiency solution for the lender so that they don't lose a client to a competition, right? So my mission is how can I bring more transparency and how can I help the homeowners? But really the product that I'm using to do that is a product that we sell to the mortgage lenders. Okay. So that's how it started. But eventually it became more of a technology solution, not just the web application for lenders to go to, but you know, we took there are 6 different PMI providers in the United States, and we took their processes of API and we simplified it into one. So now that mortgage software solutions can plug it into their system. So now it's a button rather than you go in and putting in 6 separate information. Now, if you can put our button inside the mortgage software solutions where lenders kind of do their day-to-day and maintenance of records, then we simplify this process for the lenders to do it within their software rather than go to a web app. And so through that, we really realized, hey, there are more problems that we can solve. It's not just quoting. There's an entire suite of products that we can build to make it efficient. So that's been kind of the progression of our company.
So let's talk about kind of that origin story, though. So you see this problem.
Yeah.
You know that there's a better way to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you start doing it manually? Do you start doing it as for the company that you worked for at the time? Was it a side gig kind of thing? Tell me a little bit about how this started, in those terms.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually really funny. And some of you might know who Donald Hawkins is. He was an entrepreneur in Kansas City. We get to meet through our kids, and he was telling me, like, hey, I do startup, and if you ever have any pain points, you know, usually you can do something to solve it. And at the time I was like, that's such an interesting thing. I do have a pain point. Now, I've had this voice in my head for almost 2 years by then, right? Of like, how can I make it more transparent? It just kept coming back to me, like, you've got to make this more transparent. But when you don't know technology, and when all I was is the financial, like the lender, right? You don't think that that can be solved. So I remember kind of telling him, here's the problem. And he was like, you don't think there's a solution there that exists? And I was like, no, there isn't. He's like, I don't believe that. So anyway, he kind of helped me with the right connections, and then and helped kind of do it from ground up, build that up for us. And then he has other ventures that, you know, he went to follow, and he said, this is going to be yours. And just remember, I was just a mortgage loan originator that had no idea what he was talking about. APIs, term sheets, raising money. And I'm like, he would come to our house and he would speak for like an hour, and then he would leave, and I would have understood maybe 10% of what he was saying. 10%. And I would ask my husband, like, did you understand anything? And he'd be like, no.
Is he gone?
Yeah. But eventually he continued to kind of just reiterate, and then it became, I understood 50% of, you know, what he was saying, and 70%, and finally now I can understand what he was talking about. It's a whole different language there.
And here you were teaching others. So
yeah.
It's funny to me because a lot of the entrepreneurs that I've worked with, you know, I've just heard this even recently. When Toby was here, Toby was talking about Redeem, and I hear this repeatedly of entrepreneurs that find pain points, and usually they don't say things like, I want to make things more transparent. They're like, well, this sucks, or this is hard, or this shouldn't be this way. You know, it's just like, it's truly something that just catches them as this is not the way this should be. And then well, somebody's probably already fixed this stops so many people. That idea of, oh, well, there's probably already a solution for this. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes when you just dig into it, there's a reason it's a pain point. Mm-hmm. Nobody's fixed it yet.
Yeah.
Right? And so what process, or did Donald go through a process to evaluate whether anybody had done it? Did you look at the competitive landscape? And was that where the moment was of, really, nobody's done this yet?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I went through a lot of like roller coaster of emotions, right? So at the beginning, we do like a lot of research, and I'm like, I don't think there's anyone that's doing this. Like, we timed this great. And the time that we were building it, there's a big mortgage software solution that comes up with this very similar thing, right? But that's not what their core focus is. They're focused on other things, but this is just the feature that they built, right? And so that's like me as a new founder, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is dead. Like, we don't have any opportunity. Like, let's just, in my mind, like, let's kill it, because there's no way we would compete with this huge player, right? And then there was enough push, I think, from other entrepreneurs, including Donald, right? Like, okay, what is it doing that you could potentially do a little bit better? You know, why just kill the idea? Let's see what it looks like. But you know what, that happened was when that big mortgage software solution kind of implemented their system, it really kind of opened up the idea that it can be compared. So they were more of an indicator that something like this is needed, rather than me kind of taking a step back and say, oh wow, this is scary, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally. Like,
yeah.
I always ask, who are your competitors? And if the answer is none, then
yeah.
That's a red flag for me as an investor or as a mentor of, we haven't maybe done enough research, or the problem's not big enough to care about, to solve. But if there's somebody that's already doing it, they're just not doing it well, that's the green light.
Yeah.
Right? That's the, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this was the let's go.
It was.
Right?
It was.
But you still had that thing, I think I remember having this conversation with you previously at some point in time, maybe we were at a networking event or something, where you were talking about that trepidation or that issue with this competitor and their relationship with some of the mortgage lenders. Like, they already had strong relationships because they were like a gorilla in the room in some of those types of things. And how do you get in those conversations?
You know, I think the mortgage world itself is a very niche market, and so much of it is relationship based, and it's very behind the times when it comes to technology. And I think Brett would tell you that it's all about marketing, right? And so we tested many different ways to say, okay, what's the right type of marketing? And ultimately what we really realized is that in a niche market, you kind of want to go to the conferences, and you can't just and this is me coming from like the banking world of, okay, if I sell a credit card, it closes today, right? And if I go to mortgage closes in 30 days. Now, so you have this like quick close process. But in the niche market where it's very relationship driven, you've got to really stand out and put your marketing out there and say, this is who we are, we exist, and you kind of want to be repeatedly there. And so that's ultimately, after spending lots of money, I think, realizing, you know what, this is a little different to market here. We should put more of our money into conferences, where those relationships are. So we're more of a trailblazer in a really huge market. But you know, we believe in the technology that we're building, and we do think that timing is right, and it, you know, eventually will get more massive adoption. We're just in the process of continuing to build what we think is the right thing to build, with the feedback of the customers, the private mortgage insurance providers, as well as the mortgage software solutions. So we focus on, okay, how can we build kind of the best product out there with all of the feedback, and then adoption is gonna come. That's the idea that we have, that we believe that we continue building on.
So let's talk about that first cut. Let's talk about that moment where it was like, oh, this works.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh my gosh. That first customer moment for you.
Yeah, so it was actually really funny. We went to National Bank of Kansas City. They're one of the largest, they're in Kansas City, and they happen to be one of the largest mortgage lenders in the United States. We take our solution, and it wasn't perfect, because it was super MVP. So
Honestly, I want to stop
yeah.
you there. When you say super MVP,
Okay.
describe a little bit what that means to you, and what an MVP looked like for you in that situation.
Right, so it's minimum viable product, right? So it's not working super fast. It's just kind of your first iteration of the product. And NBKC brought their top loan officers into the same room, and they showed the demo. We showed the demo. And it took maybe like a minute to get all of the 6 quotes, right? And the lenders are like, this is awesome that it's side by side, but my gosh, it takes so long, right? And so that's how it was. But that's when we knew, when we had all the top lenders there, and they were all like, oh wow, this would be pretty awesome. And if you can make it fast, we will become your first clients. And so that's when we knew that we had a product that could be sold, right? That somebody's willing to pay.
Sure.
And that's when we went on the fundraising journey, where Donald was like, okay, now you're gonna go raise $500K. And I was like, wait, what? I don't know anybody. I'm from Mongolia. Like, no, and I don't know what to do but you know what? Ultimately, we ended up raising it.
You just needed to find the lady upstairs again, right?
Yeah, exactly. The bootlegger.
So let's talk a little bit about that process. And so you don't know, like, I don't know anybody that has $500K. Like,
right.
How am I gonna get $500K, Donald? What
Right.
are we talking about? So what was the fundraising journey like for you?
Yeah, you know, the beautiful thing about Kansas City is I really went through each of the steps. I think most startups have the opportunity to go through. So I went to Digital Sandbox, got $20,000. They said, here's the $20,000, go build your product, right? And so we built that, we took that slow, the product, and we took that $20,000 and made it a better version, faster version, so that NBKC could start actually paying us. And then we went to Pure Pitch Rally, where I pitched, and it really put us in front of many investors that are in Kansas City that I got to have one-on-one time with. And
you were also a big winner at Pure Pitch Rally.
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you, yes. Yeah. I was very fortunate there. And I met with many, many good entrepreneurs who took the time to meet with me, to give me feedback. And then ultimately there's a family office here in Kansas City, just one of my favorite investors. I don't want to say one of my favorite investors, because all my investors are awesome, but they were the first one to really come out and say, you know what, we're here to support a minority women business, and what do you have? And I just had the I got introduced to them, and I pitched to them. This was just the idea at the beginning, and they were so amazing. They knew this was the first time I'm doing it. They said, okay, we trust that you can do this. We'll give you some of it. And ultimately that led to kind of hiring the first person, the second person, and then being able to have a little bit of traction, and then bring in more investors.
Now, did they open doors to investors for you as well?
Not ultimately, but I do think they brought on more legitimacy, right? They,
sure.
You know, we already had some money committed,
Yep.
so the next investors felt a bit more confident.
First check kind of town. Yeah, you get that first check, everything changes for sure. So,
100%.
all right. So, did you get to the 500K mark? Did you close a 500K round?
Yeah. So by the time we closed it, I think it was closer to like 750 actually.
Subscribe to your first round.
Yes, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about where you're at with the company now. So how many customers, roughly?
Yeah, we have about 12 lenders utilizing our customers, but we just integrated with a big mortgage software solution. That's going to open up the doors to many lenders rather than us going lender by lender.
Is it a one-to-one to many kind of market?
100%.
Like, yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, and we have a couple big conversations going on with, or a couple in the pipeline that's about to lead us to more of those as well. So.
Okay. And then employees?
Yeah, we have 11 employees.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You're one of the high-growth employers. We love to talk about high-growth enterprise here at Keystone, so congratulations on that. Where are you going next with the company? So you've got these pipeline conversations that are going on. You've got, are you doing the integration right now with the lender?
So it's already integrated.
With
so
the mortgage
just,
company, I guess, but then they have relationships with lenders, or?
Yes, it's a mortgage software solution. So
okay.
where the lenders go in and do kind of the end-to-end processes. We're after those to get integrated to them. In terms of our product roadmap, we have, so remember how we've really solved the quoting solution really well, as best as we can. Now there are other things, like what happens when an actual quote turns into an insurance, right? That needs to get binded, right? So there's a process there. And then once it's binded, then it has to get activated. And there's a need for like an end-to-end seamless API, and that's what we're doing, is essentially completing that end-to-end. And then we do have more ideas of products coming, but we're hyper-focused on finishing that first.
I feel like I'm sitting in a pipeline module right now. So when you talk about supply chain and how the product, like you pick one, you get good at it, and then you start to move into the next piece of the supply chain or the next piece of the puzzle. So you're on that journey right now.
For sure.
Where do you see this in 5 years? I mean, where do you want to be in 5 years, and where do you see PMI Rate Pro in 5 years?
You know, in 5 years, I want PMI Rate Pro to be really successful, but I see myself maybe doing more things than just PMI Rate Pro, right? I've gotten really good understanding of what it takes to start a company, to raise money, to bring product to the market. I need to execute, right? Executing means making sure that the company gets mass adoption, right? That's my focus here in the next 2 years. But in 5 years, where I'd like to be is, you know, maybe I've had another company, right? Okay. Making even bigger changes.
Do you already have those pain points in your head?
Yeah, 100%.
Are they related to what you? So I guess Are they related to what you do now and the journey you've been on, or are they other things that you've thought about that might not even be in this space?
You know, I think ultimately I like the mortgage space. I've learned how to do it, so it's still mortgage ideas that I have. Okay. But I think with my next one, I just have to be really more intentional on, is this technology that I'm building, could it be used globally rather than just look at America? Because right now I'm solving a problem within America where there's private mortgage insurance.
Is there enough similarities across markets in the way mortgages work? I guess I'm not familiar with how mortgages work in other countries. Is it fairly, like set up in a common way? And no.
That's an amazing question. So if you think about like Canada, I think they have 3 private mortgage insurance companies. USA is 6. But if you look at all the other countries, there's no private mortgage insurance companies. They're just requiring really hefty down payments.
Okay.
And so that's what I mean
different
by...
Different pain point, different problem.
Exactly. Yeah. So what I mean by I want to make sure to be intentional is how can I build a product that not can be used in America, but in all the other countries in the world. That's kind of what I would like to be doing in 5 years.
You'll get there. I have all the confidence in the world you're going to do that.
Isn't that funny how most people have so much more confidence in you than you yourself?
100%. Like we always talk about this, you know, entrepreneurs that have imposter syndrome, where they have there's this constant self-doubt, but it turns into a motivator. Yeah. Like you want to prove to yourself that you can do it, or that that you're going to get it done. At least I've heard that. I feel that sometimes. I have no idea what I'm doing here, but I'm gonna keep
figure
going.
it out.
I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna keep going.
You know, there was I've really related to this lady who was also a startup person. She said, "Look, I was always the last person to bet on myself." Isn't that crazy? Where investors are betting on you, and you're the last person to bet on yourself. So that's really what I'm focused on changing right now. Why are we entrepreneurs today? Because we can do hard things. Can you think of, if you're looking at just like comfortable life where it's not an easy thing. Like, you can take the easy route and go work at corporate and just don't take the hard part, you know what I mean? But
I think that's a grass is always greener kind of thing though. I having been in a corporate seat and literally worked in a cube for a good portion of my career, that is not fun and not easy, and it's just it's a different kind of hard. I would call it soul-sucking hard versus you have that stability or that I can just do my job. I don't have to worry about that other person's job. I can do my thing and I can go home. But it is soul-sucking. It really is in a lot of different ways.
I agree.
Different kind of pain and different kind of hard than entrepreneur, than doing your own thing. So on that piece, on like what advice you would give to entrepreneurs, I want to start with something a little bit different there based on something else you said. You're not a technologist, you're not a coder, you're not like, so how did you solve that issue as a founder? Where did you, how did you go about the first prototype? How did you go about, how am I going to build a technology roadmap? Who's going to do that? How did that progression go for you?
Oh gosh, it was such a learning process because I just had no idea about technology. And you just get in the day-to-day and you just learn. And thankfully I do have a really good technologist that works alongside of me that takes the time to explain what's happening. And so, very similar to how my conversations used to be with Donald, like where I would understand the 10%, it was the same thing with my technologist where I would just understand the 10%, eventually it just kept going and going, and now we can have a conversation at the same level of, okay, here's how we build it. So it's not something to be afraid of. I think it's just, kind of roll up your sleeves and learn.
How did you find this person?
He actually applied through LinkedIn to our, it was a job posting. It's interesting because the first person that helped us really build not a very scalable, but it's an MVP, right? And the second person that just came and rescaled the entire thing and redid the entire thing. One of the biggest learnings that I had through this process is you really want to hire somebody that's done startups, that is okay with wearing multiple hats, that is not looking for a corporate setting or more budget, more people, because it's so easy to hide behind, give me more budget in marketing, give me more budget in people, where you have to kind of find the doers that kind of have the same desire as you to go and change the world, right? Those people exist. You just have to find them. And I think the universe actually really gives them to me, really. That's how I feel.
great. So let's go back in time. You've identified this pain point. You know you want to go solve it. What would you do differently this time as an entrepreneur? What have you learned about your journey that you would do differently, or that you would, if someone else came to you and said, Nomi, so you're Donald now.
Yeah.
Somebody comes to you and says, I have this pain point. What advice would you give them based on what you've learned?
I wouldn't really do anything differently because I think everybody has their journey. So, I never forget Toby Rush would tell me, like, sometimes I'd have a really hard time and I say, Toby, this is really hard. And he would say, this is your journey, it's okay. Like, this is what you're supposed to go through. So everything that I went through in my journey, like, I had to go through those to learn the lessons. But what I would tell people is just to take the chance and go do it. Because I think ultimately when I decided of letting go of my really nice cushiony job, right? And going into entrepreneurship, full-time job was like, will I regret it at my deathbed? Like, that I didn't take the chance. I think that regret's gonna cost me way more anguish than if I just took the chance and did it. So you just have to take the chance and you just have to do it because, this is gonna sound a little crazy, but you were the chosen one to go do it. Go do it. If you have the voice, you just have to go do it.
That's great advice. And I think too many people are looking for easy buttons or shortcuts, and like, your journey is your journey, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about pipeline.
Yeah.
And so after Pure Pitch Rally, right? Mm-hmm. How'd you find out about it? Donald,
yep.
Donald
And Toby.
Okay, so you had met Toby
through Pure Pitch Rally.
Oh, okay. So he was one of the sharks, I assume, and you met him through that. And they encouraged you to apply? Yep,
they encouraged us to apply.
What class were you in?
2021.
Oh, so you're in the COVID class.
Yeah.
That's right. So you guys got, you doubled up on your showcase, right?
Yeah.
Were you that class? Okay.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like for you? What has it been like for you?
Pipeline was probably one of the best places where I went and kind of dealt with my inner monsters, I think, because as an entrepreneur, so I've always been the odd one in corporate world, right? And you feel so alone, and you feel like, why am I so out of place here? But what really happened is when you go to Pipeline and you see a bunch of them that are just like you, like, oh, I'm normal, like, it's okay, and we're all just trying to do something good for the world, right? So I learned so many things when it comes to business modeling, even financial modeling, and then also just having entrepreneurs around me that were going through the same thing, that would understand my fears, everything. That's just where I went to kind of accept myself, I think, you know? And that ultimately led to becoming a better leader, I think. Accepting yourself.
Yeah, that cohort model, or that peer relation model, is, I think, extremely important. And I've heard a lot of Pipeline members, or even other other entrepreneurs that have gone through programs, that talk about you can learn a lot from your peers, but it's really that support network, or that I'm not alone kind of feeling that you get from that. Mm-hmm. And so, was it just your cohort, or was it the connection to the other members?
We were a COVID class, so I feel like we didn't have as much connection to the other members, but through my investors, I was able to kind of get in touch with a lot of Pipeline people. And one of the things that's interesting about the Pipeline people is that they encourage you to pivot, and they make you understand that it's okay to pivot. Because when you're a startup, you don't realize that you can pivot. You're like, if this isn't gonna work out, this could die, right? But Pipeline members are all done businesses themselves, where they realize that, if this doesn't work, you can pivot to something else. I think that was the biggest takeaway that I took away from Pipeline members, is okay, it doesn't mean what you have today is what's gonna be. You can pivot it. How can we help you pivot it, right? That's probably one of the biggest lessons I took away from learning to be around pipeline people.
Let's talk about being an entrepreneur in Kansas City.
Yeah.
What's that been like for you? Have you ever considered my company could be more successful if I was somewhere else?
No, I just don't think that's an option. So I haven't even thought about it. I've been so lucky to be introduced to the investors in Kansas. I've just been so fortunate to be with the right people. So all they've done was really help embrace me and then take us to where we are today. Do I think there's improvement needs? Yes, absolutely. And I'd love to be hands-on involved as I think, I gotta first execute, I think, right? And I think founders breed more founders. So I want to be able to execute first and then hopefully be able to help more founders. Now, how can I do that? And how can we bring more investments to Kansas City where somebody like me, maybe if it was easier to raise money, maybe we could have gotten, for me, it's my journey, so timing worked out the way that it was supposed to, but could we potentially help the next startup get to where they need to be faster, right?
Yeah. What are those things that you think you'd like to see different in Kansas City as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think there's so many great people that want to help the founders, but don't really know how, I think. So I think what you're doing here, I think would be awesome, just to have more people come and connect and just get to know each other and bring more people, not just the same, people, but more founders that they may not even know that this exists,
right?
But have the ideas,
right?
And the work ethic, or the willingness to go do it, right?
Right.
How can we bring them more together?
People always ask how they can help, and my response these days is just show up.
Show up, yeah.
Just show up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's gonna be my goal too.
Fantastic. Nomi, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for sharing the personal story. That's amazing. When I think of founder stories and what we've tried to do here, that one's at the top of my list now in terms of, did you know you were an entrepreneur at an early age? It sounds like you 100% knew this was going to be where you ended up. So thanks so much for sharing your story. Thanks for building what you're building here in Kansas City and being part of this ecosystem. And we're excited to see kind of where you're going with this after this. And I'll be excited to see what you do next.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you.